Welcome, Cyclone fans, to another episode of I Would Say Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, managing editor over at Wide Right and Natty Light, and the commander of the Wide Right and Natty Light Discord. Hope everybody's having a good week. Closing in on the holiday season, and I would say football is currently in this kind of in between space where we don't know who's all leaving. We don't know who's all staying. We don't know who's all coming. We know one person that's coming. We're kind of in a little bit of a limbo spot there. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And we will also talk about the coaching staff hires that have been made so far by our good friend Jimmy Rogers over there in the Jacobson building. And if anybody didn't see today, I put up an article over on the website, which I will pull up here in a second, just kind of outlining all of the currently known information, I should say. Let me just pull that up here real quick. Should have done this beforehand. There we go. Okay. So basically we've got a number of transfers out that we are aware of. We've got one flip prospect that we know of, and we have a couple coaches that have been announced that we'll start with the players first. Just to kind of get that rounded up. Then we will also talk about some of the coaches that we at least know are going to be in town. And a few of the other ones that have, we'll talk a little bit about some of the names that I don't want to divulge premium information from a paid site or, something like that, but just kind of names that I've seen thrown around on social media and things like that. Just kind of talking a little bit about that stuff. So, but let's first start talking about the players that have been going kind of in and out, roster update, basically. So on the way out, obviously Quentin Taylor Jr. We've talked about him before. Played a bunch this year in his redshirt freshman season. Go back up here. There we go. Mainly got forced into the lineup because of the injuries to Jontez Williams and Jeremiah Cooper, but he was gonna be. But I think he was always gonna break into the rotation a little bit at some point. It seemed like he was kind of I don't know if the favorite is the right word, but one of the favorites of the young guys to come in and be the running partner with Trey Bell. So I overall played pretty well. The thing to note with Quentin Taylor though is that obviously we were disappointed to see him leave just because he did play fairly well in his time that he got. But what's worth noting is that he was actually, I did not realize this until I think I read it somewhere. I don't remember where I read it, but he was actually removed from the roster before the Campbell to Penn State move was announced. So it seems to me as though he was already on the way out. He knew he was already going to be transferring. I don't know if exactly why, if it's wants to be closer to home or if there's a locker room thing, like an off the field type of issue. I'm not sure about all of that, about exactly why he's out there. But based on kind of the timing of things, it's reasonable to suggest that it is completely independent of Matt Campbell leaving for Penn State. So this one was probably just always going to happen. Another one that was just probably going to happen was Josh Patterson, who definitely was definitely a product of the injuries to the defensive backfield. He played a little bit of safety, played a little bit of corner. He played all 4 of his redshirt games, but he didn't even travel to Stillwater for the Oklahoma State game and was, basically in the portal. So this is another one that was going to happen with or without Matt Campbell, without that situation happening. The other one more here that happened that we knew was going to happen, it had already happened, was Markel Chapman. He came in originally as a transfer from Highland Community College down in Kansas. And he was originally supposed to be a depth piece on the defensive line, maybe behind Dominic Orange and Zamir Hawk, and what eventually became Elijah Carnell. He never played I believe it was like halfway through the season, like late September, early October, he announced he was transferring. So, he's on this list because he was not, he was on the list he's on the roster at the beginning of the season, is not now. But he's, was a non-fact. He literally did not play a snap for Iowa State this season. So he was a non-factor. Not necessarily a big deal. Karan Brookins was the first kind of, or was one of these players we're talking about, is the first like Campbell leaving product. Freshman receiver from New Jersey. He committed over Pitt in West Virginia, I want to say. Didn't play this at all this past season. I don't know like where I hadn't, to be perfectly honest, I was not familiar with who this player was. He announced he was transferring and I said, who is this? And so I don't know where his standing was in the pecking order of like future playing time. It may be that he was getting ready to transfer anyways, because I hadn't even heard his name as like, oh, this is an up and comer, or he might play a little bit or something like that. Not to say that he can't be a good player, that he's like not worth keeping on the roster, but he clearly did not fit into the plans either this year and maybe even not next year at receiver. And 2027 might as well be a million years away at this point, just because of how college football works and how roster turnover and all that stuff works now. So it is what it is. This name right here is by far the biggest name that has put his name in the transfer portal / is thinking about it anyways, which is Zay Robinson from West Des Moines. He went to Valley. He obviously, coming out of high school, highly touted prospect, had tons and tons of Power 5 offers. Got a little bit of playing time this season, especially on special teams. Had a chance to return a few kicks. Used all 4 of his redshirt games. Did not go past it, so he didn't burn his redshirt. He did announce. So, I would like to put a little paragraph. He's like, if you're the type of person who leads into the tea leaves, he did retweet like 3 days after he announced he was transferring or like thinking about entering the portal. He did retweet it, it's a Cyclone State. So for whatever that's worth, he clearly like loves the university. The thing I do want to point out here though, is he does say, I look forward to getting to know the coaching staff here at ISU as I go through this process, as Ames holds a special place in my heart. So that at least tells us that he's willing to listen out to hear out the coaching staff and stay if he thinks that's a good fit. I think that's a great, I think that's a great thing. I don't blame him at all. He came here to play for Matt Campbell, so I don't blame. There's really nobody on the roster that I could really blame for wanting to go someplace else, because they came to play here for a different coach than is here right now. Some guys came here because they love Iowa State, because their legacies, whatever it is, and a lot of them came here because of Matt Campbell, and I understand that. So, but he's a local kid. I don't know if he grew up an Iowa State fan or not, but he clearly loves Iowa State. So hopefully you can keep Zay Robinson. Hopefully, Jimmy Rogers understands that he has a chance to be a really big part of this offense going forward. So I hope he is a priority as far as skill players. I mean, if you're Jimmy Rogers, you'd like to keep the whole damn team if you can. That will not happen, but you'd like to keep as many guys as you can. But I'm hoping, of the guys that have a chance to go to Penn State, which I don't know if Zay Robinson does. Maybe he does. Maybe maybe the coaching staff, maybe Campbell really in Mouse really like him and they want to just take him to Penn State. Maybe. I feel like if that were the case, he would probably have already announced some sort of intention to transfer to Penn State, even though the portal's not technically open yet. So I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but I would anticipate he's probably not ready to go to Penn State yet or anything like that. So of the guys that I think I would say has a really, really good chance to hang on to, I would hope that Zay Robinson is at least somewhat of a priority for the staff to retain him, because he's a big time athlete that he's just like a year. He maybe next year he could be ready to really be a major, major impact player on the offense. Okay. So we're going to have a little bit of not fun for a second here to talk about unfortunately so far for the lack of transfers that we have seen be announced, and again, we're really early into this process. There absolutely probably will be starters that announce that they're transferring at some point. I don't know who. I genuinely can tell you I don't have any like inside info as to like, is Carson Hansen staying? Is Rocco Beck staying? I don't have it. I don't have any inside info, and I've like, if I did, I wouldn't share it with you. So that's where I'm at with it. This is just, for the lack of starters that we've seen that have declared them to be transfers. We've obviously seen a couple guys that have said, I intend to enter the transfer portal. I'll see what's happening, but I will, we'll see how that all goes type of thing. So it's not like they couldn't, or it's not like there's necessarily a big reason for them to enter the transfer portal or to not enter the transfer portal right now, unless the only thing I can think of is if like Matt Campbell kind of has a shopping list, like, oh, I want this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And, they're just saying, there's a kind of just this agreement amongst everybody. Like, yeah, these guys are going to go to Penn State, and there's no reason for them to publicly announce themselves entering the transfer portal right now, because they just kind of know that that's already going to happen. That would be the only reason, maybe. And it's certainly possible, but that would be the only reason I can think of that guys who are gonna transfer would not have already announced some sort of intention to transfer. But for all the guys that we have not seen transfer out, we have seen a somewhat significant decimation of the 2026 signee class so far, including some of the highest rated recruits in that class, with a good chunk of these guys going to Penn State. Case Evans, the quarterback for the class. Now, granted, he was originally an Oklahoma State signee at the beginning of this recruiting class period, because Iowa State had Jet Thamala, obviously, who then flipped to Alabama. Mike Gundy gets fired from Oklahoma State. Iowa State gets Case Evans, and then now that Matt Campbell leaves for Penn State, Case Evans goes to Penn State. So, shout out Case Evans for managing to do really not much and go from an Oklahoma State committing to a program that is way down right now, and was playing, was just a lame duck program the last two seasons, and then falling ass backwards into a Penn State scholarship, which is excellent work by him. And maybe he's that's not to take away from anything Case Evans is or has done, but like, to go from I started the season as an Oklahoma State commit to I finished the season as a Penn State signee. Notable thing there. Oh, Carter says, don't get me started on Jet and Milan. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of is what it is. From what I understand is the Milan Paris thing was kind of like the staff kind of couldn't believe that he committed to them as early as they did, because they just knew how good he was and how he was going to kind of blow up. And blow up he did. And obviously got he's huge offer and all that. Couple offensive linemen, Owen Winder, Pete Eglitis, and Ethan Beckman, Amarian Jackson, Cash Brock. I believe Amarian Jackson has already switched to Penn State. I'm not sure about Cash Brock. I've heard that Cash Brock may have a Penn State offer coming. Arlie Morrill is not at Penn State, but he's been kind of projected there. Kean Kaiser and Barry Freeze, I would imagine, will get looks for Penn State. I believe Tyrell Chapman has already committed to Penn State. I believe Bryson Williams has committed to Penn State. Lucas Tenbrock, the punter, has committed to Penn State. Arlie Morrill's headed to K-State. Okay. So there you go. So they got another tight end. Damn. Overall, though, I mean, just kind of a rough stretch there. I mean, with how things are, that was some of this was about to happen. Actually, one name I didn't, that actually came this afternoon since I've published this article that I need to actually update with, is unfortunately, Mr. Elijah Reeder, who, if you remember, was it just last week or 2 weeks ago? Maybe just last week already. Boy, this all moves very fast. I think it was just last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where we found Elijah Reeder. We watched some tape on him and realized that this kid is just Will McDonald reincarnate. And, unfortunately, this afternoon, Elijah Reeder also decommitted. And, being from New Jersey, I would imagine he's headed to Penn State. But yeah, Carter, some of these guys got some crazy ratings bumps by being targeted by Penn State. And it was like, if you ever needed a better piece of evidence to show that like certain schools offering just automatically, involves a ratings bump. Elijah Reeder was an 87 on 247 when he committed to Iowa State. And now that he has a Penn State offer, he's an 89. And like Marion Jackson's like a 90 and stuff like that. Like a bunch of these guys got like multiple points added onto their star ratings just because they're headed to Penn State now. So, it's kind of wild if they had gotten these, Iowa State would have had like a top 30 class if these guys had those ratings bumps before they decided they were going to go to Penn State. Yeah, Jet was mid 200s ranked. Now he's 57 overall. I think he's like the third or fourth quarterback in the class. Yeah, I mean, some of these guys really, really, really just took off as soon as, not just as soon as we got them, but as soon as, other blue bloods started getting their hands on these guys. So, there are still a number of like good commits that are still, in this class as of right now. Mason Bandauer, the legacy offensive lineman, obviously son of Todd Bandauer, former Iowa State quarterback. He's still there. I haven't like heard anything like he's an Iowa State legacy, so it makes sense for him to just kind of stay there. But Campbell could also ask to take him to Penn State. We'll see what happens here. I think, unfortunately, and there's a 2027 too, which is decommit, which is Will Slagle, which it's amazing how fast that went, because just a few weeks ago, about a month ago, we saw him commit to Iowa State football in the tailgating lots. And now here we are. He's decommitted from Iowa State. And I would imagine that Clanton and Campbell will try to take him to Penn State with them. He's a really nice player. And Slagle is an Iowa State legacy, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep him here versus going to Penn State, considering he was talking about, like his initial commitment tweet was like talking about Campbell and Clanton and how they're not going anywhere and all this, which whatever. So Caleb Francois from Minnesota, the running back from Minnesota, let me pull him up. I want to so let me pull up Caleb Francois. And I think what's notable here, about Caleb Francois is that he was specifically originally recruited to Iowa State by Tyler Roll, who is now the offensive coordinator at Iowa State. I believe he was finishing up the Lions like this week or next week or something like that, and then he'll be in town. But Caleb Francois is a really nice running back. He's a really, really nice player. I think he fit in the old scheme. I think he'll fit in the new scheme really nice. And Roll originally recruited him. I would be pretty surprised if Caleb Francois flipped. I mean, it's possible. I mean, his only offers were Iowa State and North Dakota. And the current OC is the one that originally recruited him to Iowa State. This one makes a lot of sense for him to stick around, especially just because I want to say it was earlier today, Ben Bruns, when he was on the CW pod talking about how he believes that Iowa State's offense will start looking a lot like the offense that like the Detroit Lions run. A more pro style offense. Caleb Francois fits a pro style offense really, really well. So I'm very, very excited to get him in there. I think he's going to be a really, really nice piece of this class now. So I would anticipate, just based on kind of vibes, I guess, that Iowa State would hang on to him, hang on to his commitment. Jeffrey Roberts is a local kid. I would bet he'll stay. I mean, maybe he talks to Penn State, but I would guess he'll stay. I'm not sure what Kean Kaiser has already decommitted, so I'm not sure why he's still on the list. Ajibole Afuye, would love to keep him. I don't know if he's like, I think Penn State's got a fairly, I don't know. I think their defensive line could use some spots, but I think they can go after some bigger fish than Ajibole Afuye. So, I don't really see a lot of guys on this list that I'm super worried about. Maybe Daniel Howard. But the rest of these guys on the list, I think Jeremy Lewis, I believe he just decommitted like an hour ago. I'm not incredibly worried about him. An edge rusher out of a JUCO, which sometimes those guys just don't pan out. Maybe he was gonna, I don't know. But I think most of these guys they should be able to hang on to. I'm not really sure about like Josiah Zias. Is he's from New Jersey too? Is he a guy Campbell takes with him to Penn State? Because Penn State, generally speaking, like kind of owns New Jersey, like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, Penn State kind of owns that whole area. So, if Campbell wants to take Josiah Zias to Penn State with him and offer him a scholarship there, I would be surprised. I would not be shocked if Josiah Zias goes there, but I don't know if he will. A couple local-ish kids /kids that Caleb that Tyler Roll helped commit. Hopefully, I think we've seen most if not all of the attrition from the 2026 class as far as like decommits goes. Hopefully, we do have though a 2026 flip, our first flip from Washington State, which Malcolm Watkins. He is from Bakersfield, California, which I believe is the hometown of Kamari Cotton Moya. Oh, yeah, it is. I put that note in there. Duh. Kamari Cotton Moya, also from there. He looks very much like if you were going to build like a route running slot receiver kind of guy. He's tall enough to play the X outside, but if you're thinking of like what receiver would I build to play in the slot in a pro style offense, Malcolm Watkins is pretty much right up there. Absolutely can flash on special teams a little bit. I'll pull up some of his highlights just here a little bit so you can see just a few of them. He actually plays a little bit of corner in high school as well, but here's him as a punt returner. He's not like blazing fast, but I think that part of California has pretty decent football. Good vision there. Kind of skip for a little bit. Good, good hands there. Good after the catch. Nice little run there. Overall, just a nice player for Iowa State. I think he's like an 87 on 247. Kind of terrible corner play there, but does a good job fighting him off. It just seems like a guy that can absolutely come in. He can compete in a room that needs to find some consistency. I like that as an early flip. So you'll notice on this list, I don't have in this article, I don't have a list of like guys that from Washington State that have declared themselves, potential transfers. I don't have a list on there because I don't want to speculate too much at this point in time. There's a linebacker from Washington State that also followed the staff from South Dakota State that I think would make a lot of sense for Iowa State. He'll already know the defensive system. Depending on what they think will happen with personnel wise at Iowa State, like transfer wise, like if they think Cooper Ebel or Mason Miller or whoever, if they think those guys are going to transfer, then yeah. So Polano is his last name. I watched some tape of Polano. I would love to get him. We'll see more. I think he fits. He makes a lot of sense. Right now, there's not a lot of space on the roster for him. So, but if they're anticipating that, Cooper Ebel, Caleb Rosina, Mason Miller, whoever, some of these guys, if they think that one of those guys are going to transfer and that there's going to be a spot, then Polano makes a ton of sense. Yeah, Redbird's exactly where I'm at with on this one. It's like if you see a guy that went from SDSU to Wazoo and is now in the portal, you can probably make a fairly good guess that they're at least considering coming to Iowa State. Maybe they say that, I'm not, maybe they don't follow the coach because now they're in the FBS and they're in the division of football they want to be in, and they can maybe get other offers, maybe, but it would make sense for a lot of those guys to just stick with Jimmy Rogers. So we'll see there. Yeah. Defensive tackle there last night. I've seen a couple other guys, pop up in our Discord. For anybody that's not in the Discord, I would highly recommend it. We've kind of been talking about it a little bit. There was a couple, like a corner, we had a receiver transfer, not just a receiver flip, but a receiver transfer, potentially from Washington State. So lots of guys to keep an eye on this week. If we get more concrete, like kind of info that they might be coming to Iowa State, I I will probably get a list together for later for next week's show. We'll obviously recap any future commits and all that, but also see if I can get it together like a good list of like guys I really think have a decent shot at coming to Iowa State if they haven't already committed at that point. So we'll definitely go over that stuff next week too. But the more I see this, like, so obviously it sucks to lose this list of guys. Lots of really nice players in that list. And hopefully you see more of these flips from Washington State's class for whatever players they think are going to fit here. Overall, I kind of like where they're at with it. But yeah, so yeah, the South Dakota punter, his last name is also Ebel, and now that you lost to Lucas Tenbrock, they need a punter. So if they're going to go out and get that South Dakota punter, I think that makes a lot of sense. Seen some other transfers pop up that I think seem really interesting that we'll see if they are coming here or not. But I would guess we will see a lot of those move in the next, maybe around the new year. I think the portal opens like the 2nd or the 3rd. We may see a bunch of them, like a whole swath of them commit like that day. So we will see. They may not be like able to technically commit till that day. Not sure. And hopefully we have more clarification at that point on who is going to transfer.